all of you. We start this session with a brief introduction to the course, okay, before we go on with the subsequent sessions. This GAN initiative for academic networks on production and operations management will help you to develop your internal capabilities, as we had mentioned during the introduction. So, we start with some of the typical interactive sessions, okay, and dialogues that we note based on our experience in industry, as well as from the literatures as presented in Harvard Business School or Richard Ivey School of Business. Are you familiar with this? Research and development designs the product, manufacturing builds it, and then marketing sells it. The first contextual dialogue in the context of what operations management is. So, everything is going on well in operations when you do not hear any surprises. Okay? And another dialogue, in our top management meetings, marketing and finance dominate the discussions, with operations being told to make it happen at the end of the meeting. This typically happens in all strategy meet, where there is a missing link between the manufacturing strategy and the business strategy of the organization. So, people assume that manufacturing is supposed to make up engineering delays and meet whatever promises are made by sales and marketing. And that is everywhere, in every strategy meeting, this is the kind of scenario that takes place. Are you familiar with this typical comments? Typical marketing comment: why don't we have enough capacity? Typical operations response: why don't we have accurate sales forecasts? Capacity planning is a problem area, and I hope during subsequent sessions Professor Rai will tell you all about what is capacity planning and how you solve those problems. Okay? While Professor Mukherjee in the subsequent session will detail about what is operation strategy, what are the linkages that are missing between the operation strategy and the business strategy, how do we bridge those gaps, and how to really make an effective operation strategy that will lead an organization towards business excellence. Another typical marketing comment: we need faster response, our lead times are ridiculous. And typical operations response: we need realistic customer commitments and sales forecasts that do not change like the wind. So, forecasting is a very important parameter here, and for accurate forecasting, marketing has to give the right kind of input, and that forecast will be taken as the basis for capacity planning. Okay? So, what I said during the introduction, that do not think of any operations function in isolation, because if you really want to achieve business excellence, if you want success, business success depends upon each function talking to the other in a seamless manner. That is what is basically called seamless integration, and that integration must be in the context of alignment of the goals and objectives of each function with the business strategy as a whole. And that is why you see all the business excellence models, whether you talk about Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award model or whether you talk about EFQM, There, when you go in for the assessment, when they try to see the level of excellence or the level of maturity in an organization, they try to see that whether that integration and alignment is there or not, right? And we will talk more about it during subsequent sessions. Typical marketing comment. Our customers demand customized products and services. And the typical operations response to that, we can't make money delivering 20 different variations of the same basic product or service. This is in the context of the breadth of the product line. But today, mass customization has become the prime need. Okay? And how do you achieve that in the backdrop of a competitive environment? Okay? Typical marketing comment. Our costs are so high that we are not competitive in the marketplace. What is the typical operations response to that comment? We can't provide customized products and instant delivery and superior quality all at low cost. You want customized products and instant delivery and superior quality. We can't make that happen. So, in an intensifying competitive environment characterized by demanding customers, more and more they are becoming demanding, they want customization at individual levels, accelerating pace of technological advances, shorter product life cycles, market is becoming fragmented and constantly changing competition. Your competitors are also changing every time. So, that the strategy that you say today needs to be relooked after a given point in time. It is no longer that strategy means long term planning. So, once you set your objectives and goals, you sit tight. Your goals and objectives need to be reviewed, relooked at shorter interval of time, because your competitors, they are changing their action plans, they are demanding customers. In this background, you need to revise your strategy if necessary. And global new economy. Now, I have underlined or bolded that term new economy. What is so new about it? What do we mean by new economy? It is primarily dominated by information technology. Intellectual assets is the key success factors in this new economy. Distance does not matter now. It is the intellectual property assets, and the performance measures in this new economy also is quite challenging. In the old economy, we used to talk about return on assets, but in a new economy where your primary intellectual assets cannot be determined properly, how do you determine return on assets as one of the measures? That is a big challenge. So, what are those performance measures in this scenario is also a challenge to those people who are forming the business strategy as well as to the operations analysts. What are those key performance indicators in this backdrop? How do we incorporate it in the corporate dashboard, and how do we link it with other performance indicators or performance measures? That is the challenge. So, under this scenario, how do we compete and compare ourselves with our lead competitors? That is one of the big challenge. Second, what do we need to improve first? How do I prioritize my objectives or my goals? Because this prioritization is one of the most important things that will lead to success. Until and unless this priority determination is not properly done, you are not going to excel. And the biggest challenge in front of even those industries who are doing pretty well, that how do they move up the maturity level. Everywhere, particularly in IT industries, you see people talk about getting PCMM level 5 certification. And that level 5 certification in PCMM or CMMI, okay, is the order qualifier. The order winners or the order delighters are something else plus delta. And Professor Mukherjee in his subsequent lectures will elaborate upon those parameters which are known as order qualifiers, which give you the right to bid. And order winners are those extras that help you to win orders. And today, such kind of certification, PCMM level 5, CMMI level 5, ISO 9001, they have become order qualifiers. They give you the right to bid, but that does not guarantee you that you will win the orders. And today's order winners are going to become tomorrow's order qualifiers, and that is a big challenge. And so, in the manufacturing domain, in the operations domain, there is a maturity model. There are several levels. Every organization is at a particular level and they are trying to move up the level. The first level, what do we talk about? Internally neutral. That means just make and deliver it without any surprises. From that level, they move on to level 2, which is externally neutral. That is, you keep parity with your competitors. From there, you move to level 3, which is internally supportive. That means your manufacturing strategy is in line with your business strategy, is supporting that business strategy. And then from there to the level 4, that is externally supportive. That means operations functions become one of the biggest contributors towards the success of the organization, business success. How do we move up? How do we graduate from one level to the other? And another big challenge is here that operations is not only in the area of production of goods, but also in the area of services. And services becomes very important because the customers become a part of production as well as consumption. So, in the services domain, think of such maturity model. How do we really can conceive of a maturity model in the services domain? Because many of you are working in the services area, and today you cannot think of production of goods only, because service is also implied along with that. That sometimes become your order winners. And how do you really establish a maturity model in the service domain is a big question mark. And you have to gain proficiency in that, establishing those models. So, our response with all these questions is that one of the means to develop internal capabilities of your people to meet these challenges. Because whether you adopt a leapfrog strategy in your organization or whether you go in for continual improvements, everywhere you require certain capabilities which cannot be purchased from outside. Even if your organization is going in for breakthrough strategies, they think that finance is the only enabling factors, but you cannot purchase everything. You can purchase technology, you can purchase many other things, but those capabilities of your own employees which matters cannot be purchased. It has to be developed from inside. Whether you talk about breakthrough strategy or whether you talk about continuous improvement. Even continuous improvement requires sustained level of commitment from your people with that level of skill and knowledge. And how do you acquire that? Until and unless you have that skill developed, that knowledge developed inside your organization, you will not be able to be successful. So, how do you do that? First, engage them in cross functional assignments. Next, educate them about your competitors and the best practices. Disperse research and development around the organization, and above all acquire new skills and knowledge, which you can only acquire if you interact with learned and experienced academicians. So, there should be a linkage between institute and your organization, and not only for once, it should be on a continuous basis. That continuous interaction with the academics and the industry will help us to excel. Okay? And above all, I stress everywhere that there should be seamless integration between the operations function and the rest of the organization, and align operations objectives with the business objectives of the firm. Until and unless that is being done, nothing can be done with inspiring speech from your top management. That can motivate you for some period of time, but will not enable you to achieve that excellence, level of excellence. So, with this, when we were deliberating, Professor Rai and myself and Professor Mukherjee, we set that objectives of this course as exports participants to the fundamentals of production and operations management, because many of you are from other disciplines. So, you should know what is this production and operations management course. Enable the participants to build knowledge and confidence in the varieties of the state of art tools, techniques and methodologies in this particular domain. The third one is you must provide exposure to practical problems and their solutions through relevant case studies or interactions. And the fourth objective that we have set is that we would reduce the gap between the demand and supply of trained personnel in the area of POM. That is one of the directives given to us by Government of India. So, with these things in mind, we have set these following objectives, right. And about participants, we have an expectation that most of these participants are either undergraduate, postgraduate and PhD students in industrial engineering, business management and allied disciplines, middle level and senior managers in manufacturing and service sectors with they want to enhance their functional and operational performance and organizational competitiveness. So, we expected that some people from the industries will come and join in this course, and executives and administrative officials from government or public sectors and research organizations are also welcome for this course. About faculty, you must have already got the participants profile, faculty profile, academicians with proven knowledge, industrial experience and ability in teaching, consultancy, research and training in the field of production and operations management. Most of them are internally renowned in their respective domain from India and abroad. And the schedule that we have led has been given in your folder also. Okay. So, this is the schedule that I will be, after this session I will be giving you a brief overview of the operations management, what it is, how does it involve, and I will expose you to certain terminologies, their basic definitions, because those prerequisites will help you to understand the subsequent lectures. The primary lecture is on operations strategy, which will be taken by Professor Jyoti Mukherjee. Then Professor Rai will expose you to one of the important concept on productivity and performance management, and at the end of each day we have scheduled one session which we call as participants learning session, wherein you can interact with the faculties who will be present over here to clarify your doubts, your objectives, because please feel free to interact, because that is the scope that you are getting to get everything clarified what you do not understand during the session. Then the next day on 24th May we start with operation strategy again by Professor Mukherjee. Then I will continue with the operations management. basically here I would like to give you the different types of operational processes that exist in the organization and how to choose the right kind of process, the different components of operations, the basics. Okay. And then again Professor Rai will take that productivity and performance management. Okay. Then subsequently he will introduce you to the most important concept of capacity planning. Okay. Third day again Professor Mukherjee will elaborate on that same area, capacity planning, because that is a very important area. And then Professor Mukherjee will talk about flexible manufacturing systems, which sometimes becomes a very important dimension, because in the strategy sessions he will tell you about how to balance between focus and flexibility. These are two new terms, and you must understand why focusing is required, how to balance between focus and flexibility. That is one of the theme in his lecture topic. And then again Professor Rai will take up one case on capacity planning, and next day we start with supply network, the basic concepts, and then Professor Mukherjee will give you the essence of the different concepts associated with the supply chain management, and then business forecasting by Professor Rai, and then materials requirement planning, to be followed by enterprise resource planning. Okay. I will take those two sessions on enterprise resource planning, because nowadays it is not only enterprise resource planning, it is basically the concept of enterprise systems and how business analytics dwelling upon that enterprise systems is bringing in tremendous benefit towards corporate profitability. Then another fundamental aspects in the production and operations management is inventory systems, and Professor Rai and Professor Mukherjee will deal with that. Then Professor Gautam Sengupta, he will come on that day and will give us a detailed idea about the lean management techniques, because everywhere people talk about lean management concepts, lean management techniques, how to minimize wastes around the organization. So that will be very interesting, and he has got a vast experience with him, very knowledgeable person in this area. So you will be benefited through these interactions. Then Professor Anand Teltumbe will talk about theory of constraints, because the strength of a chain is determined by this weakest link. So the bottleneck in a production system will be determined by its weakest link, how to identify that bottleneck and how to elevate those constraints. So that is the main thing of is basically Goldrat's theory of constraints, and how do we apply it in the area of operations management, in the area of production and operations, not only that, in project management also. So we will talk about those kind of concepts. Then we will have the concepts of total quality management and some detailed concepts of that, and then synthesis and implementation, and then challenges and issues in implementation, and emerging trends in operations management. This is what we have planned about this course. So with this brief introduction, I will now request you to list down. I will wait for 5 minutes. Okay. We have given you some paper, one paper. Okay. Kindly you list down your expectations from the course and hand it over to us. Okay. Maybe after this session also, because until and unless we know your expectations, we won't be able to incorporate the course corrections. As Professor Mukherjee said, that at end of every day, please give us feedback, and we will tally those feedback with the level of expectations that you have, and if we have to make course corrections, we will go and change those things, adapt, so that we can adapt our teaching methodology, our course material as per the your expectations. Okay. Second thing, see, we are not giving any hard copies of this material. What we will do at the end of the course, we will compile the lecture materials in a soft copy because nowadays that is the norm. So, we will distribute the soft copies of the course material, and there will be an examination also at the end of the day, and any other points that you would like to. With this, a very big thank you to all of you for having this patience. Thank you. Just 5 to 10 minutes. Welcome back. We start our first session on production and operations management with the title as Introduction to Operations Management. This is a very simple concept that we will be presenting to you, and this background is necessary to understand the subsequent sessions. As we have discussed that operations management has a profound effect on the business success of any organization. Along with marketing, operations often called operations, sometimes it is called production, and this is the domain, or this is the area which adds value to the inputs that the organization gets and makes money. Okay. So, the goal of operations function is to produce goods efficiently and effectively, and there is a major difference between effectiveness and efficiency, and we would like to see the broader aspects of these two terms. Okay. So, there are four fundamental aspects of achieving excellence in the area of operations management, and we will deal with those four aspects in this particular session. What are those? First of all, what is the purpose and components of operation management? This is one. The first thing. Second thing, what are the key tasks that an operations manager must manage in his respective organization? What does an operations manager do? So, first thing is, what is operations management? What are its components? The second one is, what is the role of an operations manager? What are the tasks that he accomplishes for his organization? The third thing, what are the different types of operating systems and their management requirements? And the fourth one are, what are the key tools and methodologies at his disposal, at the disposal of operations manager, for diagnosing the problems in the area of operations and how to solve those problems. So, these are the four fundamental aspects of operations management. If we are clear about it, the subsequent topics will be very easy to understand. Okay? So, as I had mentioned in the introductory session, that the one common way to describe operations function is the input transformation output model, ITO we call it. What is that? This is the model that we conceive of in the area of operations domain, where an organization gets its inputs from the suppliers, and the core of the operations function is that transformation process, and the deliverable is those outputs, which are goods and services which are getting consumed by the customers. This is the core, the heart, this is what is operations function. And the transformation process is achieved through equipment, workers, energy, and inventory is the enabler at times. It has got a positive effect, it has got a negative effect, that we will look into it. And what are the components of those equipment, or the characteristics or the parameters that you need to know when you are dealing with equipments? The capacity, flexibility, reliability, some of them. When we talk about workers, we deal with work assignments, the performance of their worker, their productivity, their reliability. And when we deal with energy, the type, also the reliability, how reliable is that source of energy, and inventory. And this entire control function is being achieved through these records. What is control function? You have a target and you have actual achievement. The deviations between your actual achievement and the target is fed back into the system, and that is what is the control loop. That is the basis through which you execute the control. That I said right in the beginning, that as at the end of each day you will give us feedback. We had laid down certain targets for the day. Your feedback will help us to measure what is the deviation from what we wanted to achieve and what we have actually achieved, and that deviation we will feed back as course correction for the next day. That is the control system that we have implemented. Similarly, in operations functions, there are certain targets and there is actual achievement, which is being measured over a period of time through these performance measures or the key performance indicators, and those deviations are fed back as means of course correction to enable this control function. Clear? So, this ITO model is very important. We have to understand this ITO model in totality. So, according to this ITO model, any organization purchases inputs from its suppliers, okay, changes them in some way, that is what we call the value addition through a transformation process, and then sells these outputs to these customers. This is the ITO model. Let us look into somewhat more depth. And as I said, that the core of operations is the transformation process, and the scope of the operations function usually also includes purchasing and often distribution. You cannot delink them. And operations is where the action is. It makes things happen. Operations is everywhere, all around us and every day. All parts of every organization have an operations component, and that is often critical to your, call it business success, financial success, whatever. Commonly, many of us associate operations function with mines, factories and so on, but in reality we see it in everyday settings. Talk about restaurants, hotels, airlines, hospitals, banks, universities, stores, everywhere operations. You name anything, everyday setting there is something which is happening, and operations includes production of goods as well as services. Let us look at the 4 important things as examples. You see, iron mine, okay, what are their inputs? The iron ore, okay. Transformation process, drilling, blasting, separating, crushing, concentrating. And what do we get as outputs? Iron oxide concentrate and waste rock. These output from the iron mines, okay, become the primary inputs to steel plants, steel mills. Like in our Tata Iron and Steel Company, from their own mines they get this as input: iron oxide, pellets, lime, coal, scrap steel. Okay. So, what do? They value add to those inputs through their smelting operation, pouring operation, oxygenating operation, rolling, forming, all these operations to get steel ingots or slabs or sheets. This output becomes an input for the various parts manufacturing shop Then in Jamshedpur, very near to this place, okay, we have this ancillary development departments or ancillary development shops for which supply as inputs to Tata Motors company. Okay. So, as parts manufacturer, their important input is this sheet steel, and then they do this pressing operation, punching operation, machining operation, painting operation, polishing operation to get all those parts and components which are ready to assemble. These parts, they become primary input for the automobile plant, and these automobile plants like Tata Motors and all, they do the welding, bolting, riveting, painting, assembling, testing, all this to deliver the finished automobile. We will talk about one important concept. Professor Mukherjee will talk to you. See, previously many of these operations were done inside the automobile plant itself. They were what we will call vertically integrated operations. But today, every organization talks about their core competence. What is this concept? The concept of core competence means you cannot do everything equally well. Out of all those things that you do, some of that you do much better than your lead competitors, and you acquire that competence through years of experience. There is a lot of tacit knowledge involved in gaining that competence. So, organizations would like to retain those competence in house, and the rest of the thing they would like to get it done by others who can do it better than their competitors, and that is the concept of outsourcing. So, most of the automobile plants today, they do the assembly inside because that is their core competence. Rest of the thing they have outsourced to various companies who can do them better. Like say, when I joined as a graduate trainee engineer in Tata Motors, we used to have a forging plant inside the premises, a foundry plant, an engine building plant, like this. Everything we used to do in house. It was a vertically integrated organization. But today you see, engine manufacturing is being done by a third party, which is a collaboration between Tata and Cummins. They call it Tata Cummins plant. They supply engines to Tata Motors. Okay? We have outsourced that because they can manufacture engines much better than what we used to do. Okay? Similarly, most of these forged components we get it from Bharat Forge today. Foundry components we get it from the ancillaries that were there. Okay? So, like this we have outsourced many of these operations which we used to do once in house. And previously, see, the basis of whether we will outsource it or we will do it in house is primarily get decided by a make buy model, which used to depend on only the financial considerations. But today it is not. Today is the competency analysis, whether we have competence in that or not. Again, see, this outsourcing is a very integrated concept, because, and it is intricate in the sense that if you are talking about outsourcing your intellectual assets and properties, like many of these organizations, they have outsourced their IT functions. Now, there is a catch in that. When you are outsourcing all those functions where intellectual property or where certain process knowledge which gives you the competitive advantage is involved, to what extent you will outsource and to whom you should outsource, whether you will have an arm's length relationship with those outsourcing party or you would like to consider them as your partners. That supplier relationship management becomes a very important issue in that context. How do we make it happen? Look at the component suppliers of Toyota and Honda. They are as if their own wings. Unlike the European automobile companies or the American automobile companies, where they every year dictate terms on their suppliers in terms of reducing cost. The Toyota and Honda, what do? They send their own engineers to the plants of those suppliers, help them to improve their processes, help them to reduce their costs and pass on the benefits to the suppliers themselves, majority of that benefits. They become a as if another division of that Toyota and Honda. That is when we talk about supplier relationship management. How do you treat your suppliers as partners? Because long term sustainable relationship with your suppliers depends on certain aspects, and those are very important areas in the area of operations domain that you need to consider. Professor Mukherjee will tell you on this, because until and unless you consider those constructs which help you to develop a sustainable relationship, okay, the suppliers will try to take advantage of you, and that relationship will fail. Okay. We will look into that later. Here is the picture of iron mine. Okay. Then parts manufacturing, because that output from iron mine goes to steel parts, steel mills, then it goes to parts manufacturing, and then finally to automobile assembly plant. You see, everything linked, and if everybody is a partner of other, the world would have been very nice. Even I said that restaurants and universities are organizations. What are the inputs to a restaurant? Foodstuffs, hungry customers, and what is the transformation process? Eating, order taking, preparing drinks and foods, serving, cleaning up, setting the table, and what is the output? What the output is? Satisfied customers, and on the other hand also waste food. Talk about universities. Who are the inputs? What are the inputs? Students, knowledgeable material, knowledge databases. And what is the transformation process? Analyzing the students' requirements, their performance, sorting, writing, teaching, counseling, evaluating, planning, gathering data. These are all the components of the transformation process, and output is skilled and knowledgeable graduates and new knowledge, like you will acquire some knowledge, whatever little it may be, out of this course. Other examples of operating systems, even say talk about investment management. What are the inputs? Interest rate, trend, yields, client preferences, network of contracts. The analysts, they basically analyze the data, match the clients and portfolio transactions. These are all the transformation process, and at the end you get wealthier, satisfied clients. Personnel department. What are their inputs? Staff records, performance evaluations, appraisals, departmental needs. What do? They schedule, analyze data, they interview, discuss strengths and weaknesses, they attract people. Okay. they recruit people, they train them, they develop them, and also they retire them. That is the cycle. That is the transformation process. Similarly, marketing. So, you see operations is everywhere, all around us. Now, based on those exhibits that has been shown, we have to draw certain conclusions, and these conclusions will help you to understand production and operations management much better. What are those conclusions? First, some enterprises transform materials, others transform customer needs and even customers like the universities, and some others transform information, IT companies, analytic companies. Although almost every organization transforms a mixture of inputs, there is one type of input which primarily dominates. For example, steel companies, they concentrate on transforming materials, that is iron ore, lime and coal. Dentists, doctors, theatres and universities transform customers like patients or students. Researchers or financial managers, they transform information. So, there is one type which becomes the primary input. Restaurant, they transform materials in the kitchen and customers in the dining room. Investment managers, they transform information to make decisions and transform customers through their conversations and the results of their decisions. Okay? What is the second conclusion? The second conclusion is operations is everywhere, all around us. For example, accounting department, this operations department or operations function needs processes for that transformation. Like say accounting departments, they need a process to transform transactions into financial records. Marketing departments, they need a process to capture information from customers. Okay? And sometimes even when this marketing department, they are interacting with the product design department. Okay? Because marketing is giving you the requirements, customer requirements, and in order to capture those requirements properly, lots of techniques have been evolved. One typical technique which I think Professor Rai will elaborate upon is the quality function deployment, which will basically tell you how to capture those requirements from the customers in a very correct manner, prioritize among these requirements, and what are those design features or the product features that will address those requirements. What are the interactions between these product features, okay? And then they will prioritize, they might even look at the existing product features or the design features that are there and compare it with their lead competitors to find out where is the area for improvement, which are those design features that need to be incorporated or which design features have to be improved upon. So, this technique is very important and widely deployed. They are called quality function deployment. There are other techniques also in the software development field also. Okay? We have various means of capturing the requirements from the customers to the marketing, and particularly the challenge comes when the requirements are not properly known, even when the customers they themselves are not able to tell you the specific requirements. At that point in time, there have been a lot of models developed in the area of software development, like say prototyping is one, where one particular prototype developed will enable the customers to elicit his requirements further. So, like this, but then some developments around that prototyping model came into the picture, wherein we call it a spiral development model, which incorporates also the risks into it. Okay? And then today we have this agile development process, in the area of software development. Can we now look into the production of goods and incorporate similar kind of models to capture customers' requirements? That is another challenge, because sometimes it may be very difficult to build a prototype in the area of actual manufacturing, because that might be costly. So, how can we incorporate equivalent model in the area of manufacturing, which will not only capture the customer's requirement, but also try to mitigate the risks involved, and also will help him to further elicit his requirements. Can we develop such models? That is the challenge. We will take the question offline or after the class. Personnel or HR departments, they need processes to hire, train, evaluate, promote, motivate, discipline and retire employees. That is the cycle that I had talked about. What is the third conclusion? All these inputs and outputs are a matter of perspective. What is output for one particular company is an input for another company. The iron mine's output, iron oxide concentrate, becomes a major input to the steel mill. In turn, its steel output is purchased by parts manufacturers who produce body panels, wheels, engines and the like for sale to automobile assemblers. So, this matter of perspective is very important. There is nothing sacrosanct about it that this will be the input, this will be the output. These output of one company can become the input for another company. And sometimes you see, what is very important is that your own output can become your input. For example, talk about the steel mills. The scrap generated by the automobile plants will become a major input to the steel companies. That is what I have written here, that scrap is particularly interesting because the steel company's output might well become one of its major inputs sometimes later when the steel is recycled. This is another important point, that these operations managers must be concerned. Not only the operations manager, I think every functional manager must now be concerned about, like the disposal of obsolete equipments from the standpoint of sustainability and environmental protection. In US and other countries, there are laws and regulations that an automobile after so many years, they need to be disposed of in a particular manner. Electronic components, they should be disposed of in this particular manner, so that they do not cause any adverse effect on the environment, that sustainability effect. And sometimes what happens, that there are markets for used cars, and also certain recycling takes place. Sometimes there is a very important concept in the operations functions which is called reverse logistics. Okay? Old equipments, old cars, after several years, okay, when they are taken back, okay, they are screened properly to see that whether there are some components which can be used as spares for new vehicles and things like that, and the rest of the things which cannot be recovered, that will be disposed of in a proper manner. How do we take those things back? How easily we can take those used cars back to our own company? That is also another area of reverse logistics, because it is very difficult to get those things back. Like sometimes back, you see, e-commerce was not very popular, because what you bought through those, suppose you do not like a particular thing, giving it back or taking it back from the customers, from the manufacturer's angle, was very difficult, because they had not thought of it in their back office operations. And that is why many times many items were not being bought through this digital means, because customers, they were apprehensive that whether if I do not like this particular equipment, or if it does not suit my requirements, whether they will take it back or not. So, how to really take it back in a smooth way is another concern, and all these things are a part of the reverse logistics. Okay. So, operations analysts must carefully define the scope of this operation system by deciding where its boundaries are. This is very important, because particularly all of you who are doing research in the area of operations management or any particular field, defining the scope, defining the boundary of the system is very important for your research work. And in that, what is important is not only defining the boundary, but clearly specify what is not included in that, because that will tell you that will decide how complicated your model will be or how easy it will be to go in for the further analysis and all. So, decide what is not to be included in the within the purview of your research work. That is very important. So, defining the scope of the system is one important or critical factor for success in research. If you do not know what is the boundary, then you will be lost in a sea. Fourth conclusion, operations add value from that ITO model. For example, banks, they collect money from depositors by paying some interest on them, and then they sell it to borrowers by charging some interest on those loans. Now, you will ask, how do they survive? How do the banks survive? They survive because there is a spread of several percentage points between these two interest rates, and the banks, they add value by providing security, information and pool of funds which is unavailable to lenders and borrowers if they would have interacted directly, because who will be the guarantor? This is one example of how operations function is adding value, particularly here in particular services through banks. Similarly, every operations functions you conceive of, it will add value in the process, and that value addition component, okay, you must try to understand, because see, whenever you are trying to improve your operations process or operations function, you have to draw the operations process chart. Okay. What are the stages, sequential stages of this transformation process? How the material flows, okay, from which workstation to another, which workstation the output is going, how long the work output or the work piece is spending time in a particular workstation. So, that you depict through a chart called operations process chart, sometimes it is called flow process chart, because see, whenever during our time, whenever we used to go in for some training or for the first few months when we get inducted in the organization, the first thing that is being asked for any trainee who is coming from an institute or he is joining an organization, in order to understand the organization, in order to understand the manufacturing process, he is being asked, draw the operations process chart, wherein we stand in front of the machine, wait and observe how the workpiece moves from one station to another station, how long it spends, what are the operations being involved, and it is also a part of the method study. Nowadays, people do not give much importance to that, but I personally feel that that is the fundamental thing that should be known to everybody. The first thing, you understand an organization, if you observe what is going on around you, if you draw the operations process chart, and if you also note the methods involved in that, because method study is very important. Okay? That will give you the feel of the organization. For example, real estate brokers are able to bring buyers and sellers together because they know the local market. Another thing, paper mills link forestry companies to newspapers because they can transform wood into paper. Okay? Fifth conclusion, breaking an operation down into its many steps can help in understanding and analysis. This is very important. Yes, when I went to Richard Ivey School of Business, this is the first thing that we had learned, that how to break down a particular operations into its different stages. Until and unless you know that, you won't be able to improve that operations. For example, an automobile assembly plant might have 1000 workstations. What is being done in each workstation? Okay? What are the workstations involved? That must be made known. For example, suppose you are preparing a meal, for example, such as breakfast of a boiled egg, coffee, orange juice, toast, which I had this morning, and that involves many steps. Each of the 4 items on the menu could be considered as a single step. Boil the egg, make the coffee, pour the juice and toast the bread. But again, consider the egg boiling step. That can be broken down into a series of steps, separate steps. For example, get the pan, pour in enough water, get the egg from the refrigerator, add it to that pan of water, put the pan on the stove, turn on the heat, wait the timer, set the timer and so on. This is what is done in method study. And the thing that is used to involve in that, we used to call it SRIDIM: select, record, examine, develop, install and then maintain. Nowadays, see, without work study and method study, operations function, knowledge of the operations function is incomplete. Previously, when we graduated in industrial engineering, one of our subject was work study and method study, which was dealt in depth. Today, in most of the organizations and institutions, this work study department or method study department has been abolished, because the industrial engineering department has lost its relevance in the context of IT applications in industry. But these are the fundamental things which excellent organizations has brought in their production department itself. All the majority of the functions of the industrial engineering department has now been a part of the production and operations functions, operations department. So, until and unless these fundamental things are being taught or practiced, particularly the method study of it, okay, operations process cannot be improved. You know, today they talk about business process engineering, which Professor Mukherjee will give you some flavor of that. But at the root of BPR, okay, the primary thing is this method study. Method study, the link is that those who are going in for continuous improvement, process improvement, they apply the concept of method study and bring in, you know, improvements in a delta manner. Okay. Whereas BPR sometimes talks about breakthrough changes. Now, there are lots of plus and minuses in that. These two strategies, you see, there are two operation strategies. Either you go in for this leapfrog improvement or leapfrog strategy, breakthrough improvement, but for that you need lot of finance and change management. Okay. But there are certain minuses about it also. Where today you implement a breakthrough strategy, you exhaust all your money. Looking at you through benchmarking operations, your competitor brings in another breakthrough improvement in his company. Now, you cannot just, because you have now by that time you have exhausted all your financial resources or whatever was budgeted, you cannot now compete with your competitor, because you are saying that he has made another breakthrough. This is one. Second thing, even through what I said, that breakthrough strategy, you require certain internal capabilities which you cannot purchase from outside. Because the breakthrough improvement, it calls for buying everything from outside. Today you buy it, but you cannot purchase certain critical competencies that you require from your people, or you have to develop it in house. It will take time. The other alternative is continual improvement, but that takes time. Okay? The productivity gain or the gain on the key performance indicators will not be as much as what you do it or gain in through the breakthrough strategies. But there also you require committed people who will have loyalty, who will stay in your organization for long period of time, okay? And they also need to be having those capabilities which they try to develop it in a house, like Kanban and other systems and all. The Japanese, they are basically trying to incorporate, and they are following that method. So, I think in the total quality management course, Professor Rai will talk about those Kanban systems, the beauty of those continual improvement system, but there are also negative traits associated with that. So, one of the most important things associated with a breakthrough strategy is that at the top level you require the management with foresight, with tremendous amount of knowledge, with lot of competence, who have seen the world around them. You may not require that level of skilled or knowledgeable people at the lower level for a breakthrough strategy, but for a continual improvement strategy, it is the other way around. Okay? Now, how to balance between them in your organization structure is also another challenge in the context of the competitive environment that you will be facing. So, I hope Professor Mukherjee will tell you some details of that, because these are the few questions that are there in my mind, because when I joined Tata Motors, we used to follow this continual improvement strategies, and everything used to get done inside. And there were lot of schemes like suggestion scheme, Kanban and other things, and slowly we are developing. That was the era between 1980 and 1994, 1995. Up to that, after Ratan Tata became the chairman of the Tata Motors or even the Tata Group companies, he scrapped that continuous improvement idea. He brought in this leapfrog strategy, because at that time there were money at their disposal, and we just went in for business process reengineering, implementation of enterprise systems, and many technologies were brought in through this leapfrog strategy. But then today again it has not become a very sustainable thing, because those negatives of leapfrog strategy has also come in. So, we will discuss about all those things, both the pluses and minuses, when sir will talk to you about operation strategy, then you will be able to appreciate those things. But these are the certain points of interest that I am raising a question which need to be discussed. Sixth conclusion is that operations need information. Without information, you are totally stuck up, because today is all about fact based decision making. The ITO model shows the flow of materials and services. You look at that dotted, you remember that some dotted line. So, those are the flow of, although this flow is central to any operating process, no process operations completely is independent of each other, and one must have to make decisions at every step. For example, in the egg boiling operation, what were the decisions that I had taken this morning? When I woke up, I said, should I fry my egg or boil it? How long should I cook it? Because Pradip was calling me, sir, you have to come. How well is the process working? Questions such as this require information, and that information must also flow. So, please see the dotted lines in the exhibit for the ITO model. Now, operating system concepts. What are the components of this transformation process? As I had mentioned in that model, equipment, people, energy and inventory. These are the components of the operation process, and you must understand these components very nicely, because that has got certain implications. How do we define equipment? The machinery needed to make production happen. Typical examples are, all of you have seen, lathes, grinders in machine shops, mixers, stoves and cash registers in restaurants, aircraft and baggage handling equipments or apparatus in airlines, computers and automated teller machines in banks. These are examples of equipments. Okay. Now, what are the important features that I have said of equipment? Is capability. How do I define capability? Capability is what a piece of equipment can do, and in the context of quality, a machine's ability to perform reproducibly is its capability. Drill presses are capable of drilling round holes, but not square ones. So, in quality terms, capability refers to a machine's ability to perform reproducibly. This is very important concept, reproducible production. So, you understand what is capability, because this concept will be later on very much required, and until and unless these concepts are clear, you will not be able to appreciate the philosophy behind the other things that we are going to introduce. What do we mean by capacity? How much a piece of equipment can hold, and the amount of material, number of customers or quantity of information that can be processed or produced in a given period of time. And there is difference between theoretical capacity and actual capacity. Theoretical capacity is what the equipment manufacturer design and build the unit to perform. This versus the operating capacity, that what happens in actual use, and the extent to which this operating capacity can be achieved equal to the theoretical capacity, okay, is one measure of the equipment's efficiency. So, you now understand what is efficiency, but that is also linked with productivity. How do we increase the efficiency of the machines? That is the question mark, and many of the operations analysts are today engaged in that. How, to what extent the theoretical capacity can be used in practice? How do we improve it? So, now you are getting the idea of efficiency. The another thing remains, that is effectiveness. We will come back to that. Again, what is flexibility? We define flexibility as the ability to cope with changing circumstances with little penalty in cost, time, effort or performance. If you have a flexible operation, you can incorporate new requirements or the changes in requirements from the customer very easily in less time or without incurring too much of cost. Like in software development operations, there is a macro design stage, micro design stage. Then what happens? Then after this micro development, the micro design, where program specs are being given to all these coding or coders. They code the program and they do the unit testing. That programs, individual programs are tested. Then it is in case of system testing or integration testing, and then user testing, and then actual launching of it. If new requirements are given at the testing stage, people say, oh, it is very costly, we cannot take it in this cycle, next time you give it, or they will say that we will raise additional cost, okay, cost invoices will be raised. So many things are there, they will try to find out excuses. That means you are not flexible. Though we agree, the later you give new requirements or changes in requirements, the costs become more and it becomes very difficult to incorporate those things. But if you are flexible, then you will find a way around it. The scalability and flexibility of any organization's competency becomes one of the critical success factors in the development and design of new products. Scalable organizations, like say suppose a new project comes which requires some more people, okay, how quickly you can build a team and put them in practice. And again, when you get when that project ends and you get another project which does not require so many people, what is your ability to keep them on bench or to retire them and keep them engaged or prepared for another project? Many organizations cannot afford to do that. There lies your scalability, and flexibility is how you can adapt to various changes without creating much of halla gulla and other things. So, that is why we have defined that flexibility is your ability to cope with changing circumstances with little penalty in cost, time, effort or performance. And this flexibility can be incorporated in terms of product range, rates of output and speed of change. Like say general purpose equipments are much more flexible. A lathe, for example, can often turn wide ranges of items that have different diameters and lengths and are composed of various materials, which is not possible when you are using a specific purpose, a machine designed for a specific purpose. Like a kitchen stove can cook almost everything. Look at an oil refinery, that is relatively inflexible, because it is designed to handle only certain types of crude oil and put out a limited range of petroleum products. It is very efficient, but not flexible. A bottling machine might be flexible in its ability to bottle almost any liquid, but inflexible because it can put it in only one size and shape of bottle. So, one of the important element in operation strategy formulation is to balance between focus and flexibility. How to balance? Okay, focus means you are setting up your plant, you are buying those machines only for or machines which can do only specific operations, whereas if you are giving emphasis on flexibility, you try to develop your plants through general purpose machines. So, whether you will be concentrating on flexibility, to what extent you will be incorporating flexibility, and how will you balance between flexibility and focus, because both has got its plus and minus points, and that is an important element of strategy which Professor Mukherjee, while dealing with the strategy, will touch upon. So, although an automobile assembly plant might be able to produce cars with a wide range of colors and options, but it can handle only a single body design and produce efficiently at only one car per minute without major line rebalancing. This is what I saw when I joined. Today, of course, we have overcome that. We are keeping the platform same. Okay, we are trying to create various body designs, but that was the fundamental thing. Not many organizations have been able to achieve that. So, here again there is a question of flexibility and focus, balancing between flexibility and focus, that question arises. Okay. Labor contracts that spell out detailed job classifications can often reduce flexibility by restricting the right to do certain type of work. and how to incorporate that flexibility in drafting the contracts is another important element of contract management. I did a lot of research work on that, because I am not in the area of contracts management, but I was asked to deliver certain lectures in contract management. So, I was seeing those contract guidelines and all, and I found that this is one of the bottleneck areas, how to incorporate the flexibility in that. Another important features of equipment is the reliability. How do we define reliability? It is the probability that the machine will work satisfactorily, provided that it is operated under the specified design guidelines or operating guidelines. Most problems happen because people do not operate it within their guidelines. They buy a 12-tonner truck and they load it with 17 tons, 18 tons, and after that they say that it is not working properly. So, those sticking to those operating guidelines is another very important thing. So, reliability is defined as the likelihood that a piece of equipment will perform as designed. High or increasing downtime and maintenance costs might indicate a decrease in reliability. Of course, in this case availability also is another measure. Okay. When we talk about people as another component in the area of operations, what are the characteristics associated with that? Capability, capacity, flexibility and reliability also apply to people who bring muscles, brains and interpersonal skills to operations. This is very important in the area of service operations management. In service operations, workers interact directly with customers, because customers, they become a part of production and consumption simultaneously, it takes place. In such a role, the interpersonal skills of the workers or the customers are an important determinant of the quality of service. Those of you who have attended my production and service operations management course must have got an idea of this particular aspect. If you have not, you can log into this YouTube and production and service operations management course. You can give my name or Professor Rai's name. We conducted a workshop there. We have extensively dealt in with this particular need of service operations. Operations and HR managers must work together closely to match the people and production tasks. This is what I was saying, that seamless integration between different functions are necessary in order to achieve business excellence. Energy is another important component of almost any operation. Our economy developed around energy sources to run mills, factories and for transportation. So, any operations functions, they need huge amounts of energy, such as steel mills, aluminum smelters and all, and that should be uninterrupted. And here that reliability factor comes into picture, because if it is interrupted, your production will go down, it will be hampered, it will be interrupted. So, everything will go for a toss. Another important component is this inventory. Inventory is an input, a component and a product of most operating systems. Identified as anything that is purchased or acquired for transformation or resale. An inventory assists in the transformation of materials into sellable goods. So, there is need of inventory. Why do we need inventory? That is very important. An inventory have been classified as either raw materials inventory or work in process inventory or finished goods inventory. Inventories means money tied up. It costs money because you are taking loans from the banks in order to have those working capital. So, more inventory means working capital tied up, you are paying interest on that. So, but still we resort to inventory. Okay. So, what should be the optimum inventory that we must have to find the right amount of economic balance is the question. But first of all, you will ask me, sir, if inventory implies that money is tied up, then why do we at all have inventory? This is another question in your mind. To that, the typical operations analysts, they have answered that inventories help to smooth the flow of materials and reduce the costs in going from the supplier through the production process and on to the customer. This is a typical definition. But then we have to analyze whether we need it, what are the costs, what are its functions, and how do we eliminate it. Though it will be dealt in details by Professor Mukherjee and Professor Rai, but still there are certain fundamental concepts you must know right at this moment in order to appreciate their class. So, let us look at some of the costs associated with inventory. Financing cost, I have already told you that in order to get that inventory, which is basically a part of your working capital, you have to take loans from the bank on which you pay interest, that is the financing cost. Obsolescence cost, which is the risk of loss of value before sale, like you have stored something as finished goods inventory and it is there in your stores for a long time, by that time another better version of that particular product is available. So, those things become obsolete. Shrinkage, because if you store inventory, damage, theft or spoilage during storage, that has got an implied cost associated with it. Then holding cost, costs of maintaining storage facilities. Scrap and rework, that is the costs of error detected long after the manufacturing, and management costs, costs of managing those resources. These are the different types of costs associated with holding inventory. Costs of not having inventory. Have you ever thought about it? Stock out cost. Suppose the customer comes in and asks for a product and you do not have it. So, there is a cost of not being able to serving the customers, lost sales. So, opportunity cost of lost sales, present and future to a customer. And accurately estimating this opportunity cost of lost sales is also a very important function, which also the marketing people they are trying to do. Idle resources, like say the production manager is asking for a particular raw material or a component, and as a materials manager you are unable to deliver it, then the particular equipment remains idle. So, there is an opportunity cost of not being able to produce during the time over which this material is not being supplied. So, that is the idle cost of opportunity cost of resources idled by lack of inventory. Then there is cost of expediting, cost to rush an order through. And sometimes inventory, suppose there are 2 machines in an assembly line and their line is not balanced, that means the production rate between these machines vary. Sometimes they try to balance it by having that inventory. Okay. So, inventories can serve more than one function at any given time. The next 2 exhibits of mine, they show some functions of inventory. Let us see. There is something called pipeline inventory, there is something called buffer or safety stock, and something which is called decoupling. Buffer stock or safety stock, all you know, is the extra stock that you keep in hand, okay, so as to guard against the fluctuations in the consumption pattern as well as the fluctuations in the lead time or the time. What is lead time? Lead time is the difference in time between placement of an order onto your supplier and the actual receipt of it. Okay. So, suppose that you are consuming 5 units per day for a particular item, and on an average, that is on an average you consume 5 units per day, and suppose you have placed an order onto the supplier for that item and he takes on an average say to supply that unit by 4 days. So, your average lead time here is 4 days and average consumption rate is 5 units per day. So, if you place an order when you have 20 units on hand, okay, everything will be nice, because by the time if your demand rate is constant and if this lead time also sticks around the average, by the time you will exhaust those 20 units, another fresh lot from the supplier will come, is it not? But unfortunately, real life is not simple, because instead of consuming 5 units per day, it might so happen that some guests have come to your house, or due to some other factors that consumption rate might go up. Suppose instead of 5 units per day, it goes up to 7 units per day. So, you will be requiring 28 units, but you are having 20 units. So, you are falling short by 8 units. Again, supposing that consumption rate is same, okay, the lead time might vary. Instead of 4 days, it can be 6 days. So, you will be requiring 6 into 5 30 units, but you have 20 units, you will be falling short by 10 units. Again, both the lead time and the consumption might fluctuate all at the same point in time. So, how much material you should have in order that you guard against both these fluctuations, that is your consumption pattern and your lead time. That is also another important job of an operations manager along with the materials manager to decide how much safety stock you should keep. Theoretically, you can, if you keep an infinite level of stock, you will never fall short, whatever may be the situation, but you cannot have that. Too much of money will be blocked. And in real life also, there are stochastic patterns. Statistically, this lead time and this consumption pattern, they are statistically varying, and anything which has got a stochastic aspect can be measured by 2 parameters. Any statistical distribution you call it, okay, normal distribution or Poisson's distribution or Weibull distribution, anything. You have to know the average of that distribution, and the fluctuation is measured by the standard deviation. Okay. So, if you know the mean and standard deviation of any distribution, you know the to some extent the nature of that distribution. Okay. So, your this lead time can be a normal distribution, your demand pattern can be normal, can be Poisson, can be anything. Okay. But there is a concept in statistics which is called central limit theorem, which basically says that no matter, irrespective of the nature of your individual distributions, when you combine several such distributions, the sum total or the resultant statistical distributions will be normal, and in that case the variance can be the sum total of the variances of these individual distributions, and depending on certain service level, okay, that you want to assume, okay, or want to design, you can multiply that factor with the resultant standard deviation to find out the optimum safety stock, which in details will be dealt in by Professor Rai and Professor Mukherjee during their deliberations. But you must know the underlying concept behind it. Okay. So, inventory is necessary as a measure for safety stock. Okay. Sometimes for decoupling, what I just mentioned, that isolating steps that operate at different rates of pattern. Two machines, they are operating at different production rate. If you want to balance the line, sometimes you resort to work in process inventory. These are simple concepts, but may not be always applicable and should not be also. So, when to apply and when not to apply, because people talk about just in time inventory and things like that, but if your infrastructure is not amenable to incorporate or implement just in time inventory, okay, then you might need to take or might need to keep some inventories. Okay. So, when do you, to what extent you will keep that inventory, when to keep that inventory, all these things Professor Mukherjee and Professor Rai, they will be discussing at a later point in time. Similarly, sometimes when the production pattern is seasonal or when the effect to take care of the business cycles, inventories are resorted to. Like when I started my industrial engineering training in Union Carbide, okay, long time there used to be a company called Carbon Products Company, Kharagpur, okay, in Calcutta, in North Calcutta. They used to manufacture the cinema arc carbons, okay, for these movies and other things. Now, there first thing I went as a trainee engineer and I found they are resorting to huge amount of inventory. And prior to the start of the training, I had attended lecture sessions on inventory control and other things in IIT. So, the first questions I asked the operations manager, Mr. Pai, who became subsequently the CEO of Wipro. He was at that time working in as works manager in that Kharagpur. Sir, your all this planning function is not doing well. So, he was smiling at me. I said, why huge amount of inventory you have piled up? Sir, what is the reason? Then he said that, look, at this point in time, we do not want to spend money in capacity expansion, and most of the laborers that we have employed, they are coming from your Bihar and Jharkhand and other areas, and they have these periodic festivals like Chhath and other festivals. So, during that time they go home and they will take the leave for 3 days and they will not come for a period of 1 month, and at that time our demand becomes too much. So, what we do, we cannot resort to C shift at that point in time, because getting labor is also another point of difficulty. So, what we do, when they are here, they are peacefully working, at that time we build up that inventory to meet that peak demand, and then again when levels of. So, that was one means of capacity leveling. Okay. So, inventory is another source for leveling capacity when you do not want to spend money on immediately going in for a capacity expansion, because at that point in time they were also not sure about the profitability of that business. They were deciding whether to keep that unit or not, whether they will spend money on that. So, those things. So, then I started learning the actual practical implications of those things. So, sometimes even those theoretical models, they are very nice to study and get full marks on that, but when you go and really observe real life situations, life becomes much more complex. You really need to think how to really help them out. Of course, again I did not completely agree with his explanations and all. So, finally, I had dealt with that particular problem in dynamic lot size balancing, and then we decided in strategy to how to really find out that optimum level of inventory. This Wagner-Wheaton algorithms, the first application of that I made in solving that particular problem. So, despite the usefulness of inventory, having too much of it creates its own problems. So, inventory not only costs money to hold, but having too much of it may confuse workers and managers. So, Professor Rai will explain you to get to the optimum level. The goal in managing inventory is to have the right amount of the right material in the right place at the right time every time. The next two slides show some ways to eliminate inventory. These are practical things, but Professor Rai will tell you the optimization models. In order to get rid of pipeline or transit inventory, my practical suggestion is locate operations as close to each other as possible. Move items between operation steps as fast as possible. Negotiate with supplier so that you can really implement the concept of vendor managed inventory or VMI. Buffer or safety stock, reduce pipeline inventories, establish close long term working relationships with your suppliers, treat them as partners and ensure high quality material that your rejection becomes minimum. Decoupling, ensure careful machine design and worker training, accept idle time or use it creatively, possibly for cleaning, job analysis and other things, and of course, apply line balancing techniques, which is a technique I do not know, we have not incorporated in this course, but that is also another important thing. If you know line balancing, okay, then you can get rid of this inventory to for the decoupling. Seasonal, work to develop sources of supply and demand that collectively extend seasons, develop processing capacity to meet peaks, and these are all practical suggestions which I observed during my work tenure, but there are mathematical models also. So, although operations has a role in satisfying marketing is the liaison between production and the firm's external customers. So, I said that seamless integration between marketing and production and finance, this is very much required. We discussed about this, that the role of marketing to capture customer requirements adequately, and Professor Rai, I will expect, will tell you about that technique of quality function deployment to capture those customer requirements and design those product features which are important critical success factors for new product development. And marketing should also be prepared to sell what operations can produce. The overcommitment they should not do. So, in the area of services management, the operations and marketing functions, they tend to merge as customers come, because customers are a part of both production and consumption. I request you to refer to the YouTube on service operations management by Professor Rai and myself. So, that will really help you. Another way to help define operations task is to consider operations from the customer's perspective. After all, customers really determine what products and services the organization should provide. The next slide outlines 5 important customer needs that have significant implications for operations. What are those? Self-explanatory. What services will we provide to accompany the product? That is also very important, because I told you after sale service sometimes becomes the order winners. And another important concept, that is the last thing that I am going to deal in this particular session, is the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness means, am I doing the right thing? This is very important. And efficiency relates to, I am not questioning whether the thing that I am doing is right or wrong. Am I doing it the right way? If you can understand these two differences, then other things are very self-evident, because effectiveness is related to quality and efficiency is related to productivity. Okay? Am I effective? Am I doing the right thing? Am I efficient? Am I doing it the right way? This is the two important difference that must be understood very properly. And sometimes effectiveness and efficiency often seem to conflict. Sometimes we can have one, but only at the expense of the other. Look at this. So, effectiveness is doing the right thing, the extent to which an objective is realized. And I have given 2 examples, railroad and restaurant in this context, and this slide is efficiency, doing things right producing effectively while minimizing waste. So, when time permits, you look into these slides. We will be distributing all the slides. So, that will clear the concept, because you must see all these concepts related to efficiency, effectiveness, flexibility, reliability, capacity, capability. These things should be absolutely clear, because otherwise you will not be able to appreciate the subsequent lectures by Professor Mukherjee. Thank you for your patience, and it was pleasure to interact with you. Thanks.